Welcome to ND Love Story, where love stories are told with raw emotions and captivating storytelling. If you enjoy heartfelt and mesmerizing love stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ND Love Story so you won't miss any episode. It was supposed to be innocent, just family, just casual conversations and meaningless jokes. But then he said something that changed everything. A proposal I never saw coming, a choice I never thought I'd have to make. And when I said yes, I knew there was no turning back because some lines aren't meant to be crossed. And yet here we are. I never thought it would happen like this. I never thought he would be the one to say it because some things just aren't supposed to happen. Some lines should never be crossed. Some thoughts should stay buried. But that night when he looked at me, everything changed. And when he made the proposal, I said yes. I hadn't seen my cousin Adrian in years. We used to be close growing up. But life got in the way. Distance, different schools, different cities. Then suddenly we were both adults living separate lives. And then he showed up at my door. It was supposed to be a short visit. A weekend at my place catching up, reminiscing, sharing drinks, nothing more, nothing unusual. But from the moment I saw him again, I knew something was different. He wasn't the same guy the first remembered from our teenage years. He was taller, sharper, more confident. And when he smiled at me for the first time in years, something in my chest tightened. We spent the first night talking, laughing about stupid childhood memories, trading stories about our lives, drinking more than we probably should have. And then at some point, the conversation shifted, the tone changed, his gaze lingered longer, his words got softer, and suddenly I felt it. Something dangerous, something I shouldn't be feeling. And then out of nowhere, he said it casual like it was nothing. Like it wasn't about to change everything. You ever wonder what it'd be like? I frowned, my head spinning slightly from the alcohol. What would be like? He smirked, as if we weren't cousin. Silence. The kind that stretched too long. The kind that felt louder than words. I should have laughed it off. I should have called him an idiot and changed the subject. But instead, I just stared at him because I knew what he was asking. I knew what he meant. And the worst part, I had wondered. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Adrian, I muttered, shaking my head. He leaned back against the couch, watching me with those unreadable gray eyes. I'm just saying, he murmured, tilting his head slightly. If things were different, you can't tell me you haven't thought about it. I should have denied it. But I didn't because in that moment I couldn't. The air between us was too thick now. The alcohol wasn't helping. The late hour wasn't helping. And the way he was looking at me, that definitely wasn't helping. My pulse hammered. Why are you saying this? I asked quietly. Adrian exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe because I've thought about it and maybe because I don't want to think about it anymore. Maybe because I just want to. No, I swallowed. Know what? He met my gaze. If it's really as wrong as it feels. The words hung in the air, daring me to react. Daring me to say something that would end this right now. But instead, I just sat there, my heart pounding because part of me already knew the answer. It was wrong, but it was also inevitable. And when he leaned in slightly, waiting, testing, daring, I let out a shaky breath and whispered the one word that sealed my fate. Yes. The second the word left my lips, everything changed. The tension between us snapped. The silence thickened. And Adrian, he just watched me like he was waiting for me to take it back. Like he was daring me to own what I had just said. But I didn't because I couldn't because the second I said yes, I knew I had already crossed the line. Adrian exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw, his expression unreadable. You sure? He murmured. His voice was different now. Lower, rougher, like he knew if I didn't stop this now, we wouldn't be able to go back. But I didn't stop it. I just sat there, pulse hammering in my chest. My entire body tense with something I couldn't name. And then he leaned in. Not much. Just enough that his breath brushed against my skin. Just enough that I felt the heat coming off his body. Just enough to make my stomach tighten. You can say no, he murmured. I swallowed hard. But I didn't say anything because we both knew I wasn't going to. The space between us disappeared slowly. Like we were both waiting for the other to stop it. Like we were both testing the edge of something dangerous. But neither of us pulled away. Not when his fingers grazed my wrist. Not when his knee pressed against mine. Not when his lips brushed against my jaw. Hesitant, testing, waiting. And when I didn't push him away, he took that as a yes. The kiss was soft at first. Like he was still giving me a chance to stop this. Like he was waiting for me to change my mind. But when I didn't, it deepened. Slow. Deliberate. Like he had been waiting for this longer than he was willing to admit. And maybe so had I don't know how long we stayed like that. How long we let ourselves pretend that this wasn't wrong. But when he finally pulled back, his breathing uneven, his gray eyes darker than I'd ever seen them, I knew this wasn't just curiosity. This wasn't just a mistake. This was real, and I had no idea what to do about it. Adrian swallowed, dragging a hand through his hair. "This is insane," he muttered. I let out a breathless laugh, still trying to catch my own. Yeah, I admitted. His lips parted like he wanted to say something. But then he just shook his head, smirking. And that's when I knew he wasn't going to stop. Not tonight. Not ever. And neither was I. The second his lips left mine, I felt it. The weight of what we had just done. The reality crashing down on me. The undeniable truth that this wasn't a mistake, because if it was, I wouldn't want to do it again. Adrian was still close. His breathing was uneven. His fingers twitching like he wasn't sure whether to let me go or pull me back in. His gray eyes locked onto mine. Searching, reading, waiting for what I didn't know. Maybe for me to say something. Maybe for me to regret it. But I didn't, because the only thing I could think about was how much I wanted more. The silence between us was thick. Not uncomfortable. Not awkward. Just heavy. Like there were a million things left unsaid. Like we had just crossed a line we weren't supposed to. And neither of us was willing to step back. Then he smirked. It was small. Barely there. But it was enough. "Okay," he murmured, running a hand through his hair. "That was unexpected, I let out a short breath, laughing under my breath. Yeah, I admitted. It was. But it wasn't a lie. We both knew it was coming. We had just been too scared to admit it." Adrian leaned back against the couch, still watching me. "You going to freak out now?" he asked. It wasn't teasing. It wasn't mocking. It was serious. Like he needed to know where I stood. Like he needed to know if I was going to run. I swallowed hard, because part of me wanted to pretend this never happened. To act like I didn't want it. But the other part, the part that still felt his lips on mine, still felt the warmth of his touch, still felt the electricity buzzing in my veins, that part wasn't ready to let go. I exhaled, dragging a hand through my hair. "No," I muttered. His eyebrow lifted slightly. "No," I met his gaze. My stomach tightening. "I don't want to freak out," I admitted. I saw it then. The flicker of relief in his expression. The tension in his shoulders loosening just slightly. And maybe that's when I knew I wasn't alone in this. Adrian shifted closer again, slowly, like he was still testing the limits. Like he was still waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. Instead, I let him study me. Let his fingers brush against my wrist. Let the silence between us say everything we weren't ready to. And when he finally whispered, "So what now?" I swallowed hard, because I had no idea. All I knew was that I didn't want to stop. And when I finally answered, my voice was quiet, certain, steady. "We figure it out." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. We figure it out. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was the truth, because I knew if I let him walk away now, we'd both spend the rest of our lives wondering. And neither of us wanted that. Adrian's gaze darkened, not with hesitation, not with doubt, with understanding, because he had been waiting for me to say it. To admit that this wasn't just curiosity. That this wasn't something we could just forget. And now that I had, he wasn't going to hold back. The air between us grew thicker. Charged. His fingers grazed my wrist. Slow. Deliberate. Like he was testing me. Like he was waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. I just sat there, pulse hammering, my skin burning where he touched me. And when he leaned in again, I let him. This time there was no hesitation. No uncertainty. Just his lips firm and deliberate, pressing against mine like he had been holding back for years. And maybe so had I. My hand moved on its own, sliding up his arm, gripping his shoulder, pulling him closer, because the second he kissed me again, the second I let myself want this, I knew I wasn't going to stop. And neither was he. The world blurred. The past, the rules, the logic, none of it mattered anymore. Not when his hands gripped my waist, firm and certain. Not when my breath hitched as he pressed me back against the couch. Not when his name left my lips in a way it never had before, because now this was real. And I wanted all of it. We finally pulled apart, our breathing heavy, our bodies still too close. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. Smirking. Well, he murmured, his voice rough. Teasing that happened. I let out a breathless laugh. My heart still racing. Yeah, I admitted it did. His smirk softened. Like he knew. Like he understood we had just crossed a line we could never uncross. And the crazy part, neither of us regretted it. The silence between us stretched. Not awkward, just heavy. Like we were both waiting for the other to say something. And then he exhaled. So what now? I swallowed hard. My fingers still tangled in his shirt because for the first time in my life I had no idea. All I knew was one thing. I didn't want this to end. And when I finally answered, my voice was quiet, steady. Sure, we don't stop. The second I said it. We don't stop. I felt it. The final wall crumbling. The last bit of hesitation disappearing because now there was no turning back. Adrian's expression shifted. His smirk softened. His fingers tightening slightly against my waist. Like he was relieved. Like he had been waiting for me to finally admit it because maybe he had. Maybe he had known all along that this wasn't just some reckless mistake. Maybe he had been waiting for me to catch up. And now that I had, nothing was stopping us. He leaned in again, slower this time, like he was savoring it. Like he wanted me to feel every second of it. And when his lips met mine again, deep and sure, I knew this wasn't just curiosity. This wasn't just a moment. This was real. And neither of us was letting go. Time blurred. His hands roamed. His touch deliberate. Mine clung to him, pulling him closer. It was slow. It was unforgiving. It was everything I'd been too afraid to want. And now that I had it, I wasn't letting go. At some point we finally pulled apart. Breathless, Adrian exhaled, dragging a hand through his hair. His lips still curved in that signature smirk. Well, he murmured, voice rough. That escalated quickly. I let out a short breath, shaking my head. You'd think he chuckled, his fingers brushing against my jaw. Lingering. Do you regret it? He asked softly. I swallowed hard. The answer was easy. No. His expression flickered like he wasn't expecting me to say it so easily. Like he had braced himself for hesitation. For doubt. But there was none because I knew now this wasn't wrong. And if it was, I didn't care. Adrian leaned back, studying me so. He murmured, what happens now? I exhaled slowly because that was the real question. We had crossed the line. We had given in. And now there was only one thing left to do. We figure it out. The silence stretched between us. Not awkward, not uncertain, just heavy because now we weren't questioning what we had done. We weren't pretending it didn't happen. We were deciding what came next. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the answer. Adrian exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. You really mean that? He murmured. His voice was softer now. Like he was still processing this. Like he was waiting for me to take it back. But I didn't because there was nothing left to take back. I wanted this I wanted him. And there was no point in pretending otherwise. Yeah, I said, voice steady, I do. Something flickered in his gaze. Something I hadn't seen before. Relief, maybe even hope. He shifted closer, his fingers brushing against mine. Not teasing, not testing, just holding. Okay, he whispered. It was quiet, simple, but it was everything because in that moment I knew he wasn't running. He wasn't letting go, and neither was I for a long time. We just sat there. The world outside didn't exist. Nothing else mattered, just him. Just us. And when he finally spoke again, his voice was low, certain, final. We keep this between us. I nodded. Yeah, for now. For now, I repeated. And I meant it because what we had, it wasn't something I was ready to share. It was ours. And that was enough for now. Some things aren't supposed to happen. Some things can't be explained. But when something feels this right, how can it be wrong? What would you do in his place? Would you have stopped or taken the risk? Let's talk in the comments if this story kept you hooked. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications for more stories that will leave you breathless. I never thought a simple moment with my roommate's brother could change everything. But when I woke up to find him standing in my room, his presence felt different, charged, almost like he was holding back something he couldn't keep inside any longer. What happened next left me questioning everything I thought I knew about us. I was deep in sleep, lost in the peaceful quiet of my room. The darkness was comforting, wrapping me in a sense of safety and serenity. And the only thing I could hear was the soft rhythm of my breathing and the faint hum of the air conditioning. It was a warm night, and I had fallen asleep early, exhausted from the day's activities. My body was still, my mind blank, and I felt completely unaware of what was going on around me. But then there was a shift. I felt a presence in the room, a strange awareness pulling me out of my dreams. I wasn't sure if it was the creak of the floor or something else entirely. But the air felt different now. Charged, heavy. My eyes fluttered open, but the room was still dark. The quiet was unsettling. For a moment, I lay there unsure if I had woken up or if I was still trapped in a dream. I turned my head slightly, and that's when I saw him, Carter. He was standing just inside the door of my room, his figure barely visible in the dim light filtering through the window. I could see the outline of his silhouette, tall and strong, with his back slightly turned to me. He wasn't speaking, and he wasn't moving. It was as though he was waiting for something, waiting for me to notice him, waiting for something to happen. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing, heavy and uneven, but there was no other noise. My mind raced. Carter? What was he doing here? Standing in the doorway of my room, looking like that? I couldn't quite place the expression on his face. There was something almost vulnerable about it, something that made my heart skip a beat. But I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why he would be standing there staring at me like that. Carter? I whispered, my voice hoarse from sleep. He didn't respond right away. He just stood there, his gaze fixed on me. I blinked a few times, trying to clear the fog of sleep from my mind, trying to make sense of the situation. My heart was starting to race, my body suddenly awake and alert. This wasn't normal. I wasn't used to Carter acting like this. He was my roommate's brother, my close friend. He wasn't supposed to be standing in my room like this. At this hour, looking so distant. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, trying to shake off the confusion. What's going on? Are you okay? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, moving silently across the room, his footsteps barely making a sound on the carpet. As he got closer, I could see the tension in his posture, the tightness in his shoulders, the way he was avoiding looking directly at me. Something was wrong. I could feel it, but I didn't know what. Carter, talk to me, I said again, more forcefully this time, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. What's going on? He stopped at the edge of the bed, his eyes still fixed on me, his face unreadable, and then, without warning, he reached out, his hand cupping my face gently. Before I could fully process what was happening, his lips were on mine. The kiss was sudden, unexpected, and everything in my body froze. I didn't know how to react. Carter's lips were warm, insistent, and yet gentle, like he was testing the waters. Unsure of how I would respond, the world seemed to stop for a moment. My breath caught in my throat, and my thoughts scattered in all directions. This couldn't be real, could it? This wasn't happening. I was still half asleep. Surely. But as I felt his lips on mine, the sensation was undeniable. His hand was still on my face, and the warmth of his touch was consuming, making my heart race even faster. But then, as quickly as it started, Carter pulled away. I blinked, my eyes wide, trying to comprehend what had just happened. My mind was a blur. I was still half in a daze. But the panic was starting to set in. I looked at him, my breath coming in short gasps, trying to make sense of the situation. Carter? I whispered, my voice shaky. What was that? He stood there, his eyes wide, his lips parted as though he didn't know what to say. For a long moment, there was only silence between us, heavy and thick, like the air itself was holding its breath. I'm sorry, he finally stammered, taking a step back, his eyes avoiding mine, his hands rubbing nervously against his jeans. I didn't mean to. No, I interrupted, my voice barely above a whisper. Don't say that. Why did you do that? Carter's gaze flickered back to me, and I saw a mixture of confusion and regret in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. He seemed unsure, lost in his own thoughts, his brow furrowed as though he was searching for the right words. But they eluded him. I don't know, he said finally, his voice barely audible. I don't know why. I couldn't stop myself. I've been thinking about it for so long. And then I don't know what happened. I stared at him, my heart still pounding in my chest. The shock was beginning to wear off, but the confusion was only deepening. Carter and I had always been close. But this was something entirely different. I didn't know how to process what had just happened. How was I supposed to respond to this? What did it mean? Carter, I didn't know how to finish that sentence. My mind was still reeling, Trying to find some semblance of clarity. What do you mean you've been thinking about it?